Hi guys, it is Thanksgiving, and so for Thanksgiving I wanted to say some books that I am grateful for because I like books. Today, this episode of Booksgiving shall be books that I'm grateful for, and these are either books that I love, were a pivotal part of my love for reading, or helped me out when I was in a really bad place. And sprinkled in here is just going to be books that I think are good and more people should read. So this is like, not necessarily recommendations, just these are books that I love kind of a video. Yeah, these are in literally no particular order. I have a giant pile of books on my bed, so I'm just gonna try to like give a quick synopsis and why I love them really quick, otherwise this video is going to be 7 hours long. So first off, we're gonna do Ellen Tebbets by Beverly Cleary. This is my mom's copy actually that I had on my bookshelf when I was younger. This is I don't think it's part of the Ramona and Beezus world. It might be adjacent to it, but this is the book that my mom had when she was a child and I had on my bookshelf when I was younger. And well, by bookshelf I mean my shelf in my closet where I held all of my books, and I read this so many times and I actually want to reread it, but this copy is too damaged to read. I should actually go put it upstairs in my mom's room so she can take care of it. But I love this book. I remember reading it when I was like probably 9 and just thinking like, I want to have a friendship like the friendship in this book. It has a really beautiful story about forgiveness and friendship. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Now this one's representing the whole series because I didn't want to grab every single one of the books from out there. These ones are books, I guess I'm starting with the books that aren't on my personal bookshelf because then I can put them back outside on the family bookshelf. But this series, my mom loved it when she was younger, and I wasn't allowed to read it until I turned 10. And I begged my mom to let me read it before that, and she's like, no, you don't get to read it, it's too scary. It wasn't too scary. When I turned 10, I was like, Mom, you're taking me to the library right now, and I'm gonna take every single one of these books, and I'm gonna read every single one of these books. And she was like, well, maybe I should wait until you turn like 11. I'm like, Mom, you promised, I'm reading these now. I read them all within the span of a week, and I have been in love with Harry Potter ever since. I haven't read them, I reread them a bunch of times when I was in like middle school, and then I kind of got sick of rereading them, but I want to reread them now that I'm kind of like more an adult with my adult brain. But I love Harry Potter. It's a classic for a reason, and the reason is it's good. The Mysterious Benedict Society by Trenton Lee Stewart. This book was just a good book, honestly. I have not heard very many people talking about this. It's kind of long for like a middle grade book, but it's a mystery. There's 5 books in the series now. I forgot that they added a new one, but there's 5 books in the series. 4 kids who are smart, but all in different ways, and they have to solve a mystery and stop a supervillain from taking over the world. But it's not in like oh, you're orphans and you don't have any support and you have to do it all by yourself. No, they have a fantastic family structure behind them, even though they're all orphans, but there's a found family aspect to it, and it's really smart riddles. It's really kind and loving, and they're not like mean to each other. They're wholesome and they're happy, and they still have really high stakes, and I think about the problems in them a lot and think like, oh wow, that was interesting. They're books I think about constantly. Princess of Glass by Jessica D. George. Now this is the second book in the series, but this is the book that revolutionized how I think about fairy tale retellings. Before this point, I don't think I'd read a fairy tale retelling that twisted it quite as much as this one did, and I fell in love with, first, the way that she writes. I need to read more of her books. I've read so many of them, but there are more that I need to read. And then also just the way that I thought about the Cinderella story, because if you didn't know, I want to write a Cinderella retelling, and this book revolutionized how I thought about how you could do that, because up till then I was reading like the shorter chapter books where sometimes it'd be the Cinderella story, but it was mostly just the Hans Christian Andersen version or the Brothers Grimm version. There wasn't really any changes to the original story and any upgrades and like that sort of a thing. But this book, I was like, whoa, wait, you can change it. You can have them be in a different country. You can have them interconnect with other fairy tales, and I love it so much. The first book is Princess of the Midnight Ball, and it's kind of a 12 Dancing Princess retelling, but the series has magic, and they're fighting against the bad evil in the 3 books. There's 3. A Girl of the Limberlost by Jean Stratton Porter. I have recently reread this, and it's not as good as I remembered, but when I was younger, I loved this. I loved the love story. I loved how she was so smart. I loved how she worked towards what she wanted. It follows a girl who wants to go to college. Well, I guess it was high school for them, but she wants to go to high school, and then she can't because she doesn't have money, and her mom's not going to pay for it because her mom's like, we're so poor, we can't pay for this. And she's like, yeah, well, I really want to learn. And so she works her way into high school, and she meets friends, and then like the plot happens. But it's kind of it kind of feels like two different books. Like the first half involves her going to college and the second half is basically just her and her love life, which I'm not complaining about, but on the reread I was like, didn't love it quite as much as I used to love it, but it is a very good classic. And the prequel, Freckles, is fantastic, wonderful book. But these books, I just loved Eleonora, and I loved the way that she thought, and I love the way that she saw the world and the wonder in it, and how she loved the birds and the bees and the flowers and all that sort of a thing. And it made me have a greater love for nature in general, basically just because of this book, and then also Freckles. We've got the Chronicles of Narnia. This is my mom's box set that she had when she was younger, and it is so old. These books are literally falling apart, so I'm not going to try to take them out of the box, but I read these probably 10 and 11 years old. I read these, and I remember sitting in my bed and reading the books, and I remember getting to the last book, and I didn't understand anything that was going on. I need to reread these books now that I have an older brain, but I remember just loving them, being able to go through a portal into a magical land and meet all these people, and Tumnus the Fawn. And I think my favorite book, okay, I love Prince Caspian, and I also love Voyage of the Dawn Treader because I love Prince Caspian. I actually really enjoyed The Horse and His Boy upon the reread, and then The Silver Chair has always been my favorite. I'm so sad that The Silver Chair never got made into a movie because I would have loved to see it. But these books, I think, were probably one of the first fantasy books that I loved and sparked my love for fantasy in general. Princess Academy by Shannon Hale. I think this is the first book I read by her. I did read The Goose Girl, but I can't remember whether I read this first or The Goose Girl first. I love both of them, but for different reasons. This one I love because I love the fact that they have to communicate with each other, and they don't solve their problems by fighting. Basically, they solve their problems by being smart and figuring stuff out, and communication and cooperation. It's kind of middle grade, but you can read it when you're older, and it's still a good book. Can you tell I like princess books and books about girls? They're just my favorite. Why is the light the way that it is? Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Fablehaven by Brandon Mull. I distinctly remember my mom saying, you should read these books, they're really good. And I was like, no, the cover is horrible, I'm not reading it. And she's like, just read the first book and see how you feel. Picked it up, fell in love. The main idea of this book is these two kids, Kendra and Seth, go to their grandparents' house. I don't know if they think it's a farm. They think it's a farm. They go to their grandparents' farm, and it's this big mansion with lots of land and stuff like that. And while they're there, they realize that their grandparents are actually living on basically like a conservation area, but for magical creatures. And so you follow their shenanigans as they get into all the magical creature stuff. And there's a whole series, and it's really, really good. If you've ever read a book, you've probably heard of Fablehaven. This book was probably one of the ones that made me love fantasy again, because I didn't read a lot of it besides the classics when I was younger. I never really picked up newer books and were like, oh, I'm going to try reading this. This was one of the first ones that I read that I was like, oh, this is really good and I really love it. Another one was, where is it? The other one that got me into fantasy was Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians. This one, I love these terrible covers. You can't tell me that this makes you want to read the book. To be fair, it didn't make me want to read the book. I got recommended this series by a family friend because he said, there's an author who writes fantastic books that you might enjoy that has the same last name as you. And I totally forgot about it until we were living here, from Ohio to living here. And I was like, oh yeah, he recommended these books to me. And I think I read the first book and I didn't keep reading them. And I remembered last name is me, so it's Sanderson, something about Alcatraz. Looked it up, started reading these series. And then I just kept reading Brandon Sanderson. I haven't looked back. They're so funny, guys. These are so funny. I love them so much. I don't enjoy the last couple books quite as much as the first ones. The first ones are just drop dead hilarious, but the whole series is pretty good. These ones brought me into Brandon Sanderson. That's why these are so influential, because in Brandon Sanderson, I have read Calamity and where's the other one? And Edge Dancer. So over the years, picked up all of them. I've read pretty much everything Brandon Sanderson has ever written, except for a couple short stories and one audiobook that actually I was planning on reading this month. But in 2021, I got to go to the first ever Dragonsteel Con, and I went with my dad and my friend, and there was this lottery you could enter so you can meet him. My friend didn't get it, I didn't get it, but my dad got it, and so he brought both of us to meet him. And so this was the book that I got when I was there, because it was for Calamity. Cytonic. Where's Cytonic? I don't know, I'm not grabbing Cytonic. Love Calamity too. I was meaning to grab Cytonic, but that's at the very bottom of the stack, so it's gonna stay there. But I got to meet him, and I got to get my Edge Dancer copy that I bought there signed, and he wrote to a fellow Sanderson, because my last name's Sanderson. And I just think it's so cool that I got to meet one of my favorite authors in the entire world, and I'm so excited to read the 5th Stormlight that's coming out actually in less than a month. That's insane. I cannot believe that I'm gonna have my hands on the finale of that arc. Oh, I'm so excited. Anyway, I just love his books. They're so good, and now I am spoiled for any other fantasy because his are just they're so satisfying to read and so well written that I can't go back now. Kind of switching gears, we've got Trixie Belden and The Secret of the Mansion. My mom got me this book from the thrift store, and she said, hey, I read these when I was younger. You should see if you like them. And I read the first one. I was like, wait, this is fantastic. Are there any more? And she's like, sorry, I went back. They were all bought. She bought them for me. She gave them to me for my birthday, but I found them beforehand. And so she's like, well, you can read them. You already found them. They were in the box in like the storage room. And I don't even know why I was looking through there, but I found them and I was like, Mom, did you buy these? She's like, yeah, I got them for you for your birthday. And it was like probably 2 weeks before my birthday. And I was like, okay. And so I started reading them. I read so many of these books because I think that was the summer that I broke my arm. So I was probably 7 when I read the first one. Yeah, I was probably 7 when I read this the first time. And then I broke my arm, and so I had a cast on my arm for the whole summer and I could do nothing. And so I read every single one of the 39 of these books. And we gave most of them back to the thrift store because they take up so much space on a shelf, and none of my siblings wanted to read them. None of them got like the itch, but these ones made me love mystery books, and they were really, the first like 15 are pretty good, and then after that they're just kind of a little bit boring because they all kind of turn into the same thing. But the author, my goodness, she had so many ideas. I remember they have a very distinct smell to them because they're such old books. I remember reading them on the couch and finishing one and grabbing the next one that was right next to it and then reading that one. That was a good summer, even though my arm was broken. Another one, since I guess I'm gonna go with ones that my mom told me to read. I think my grandma read these books and then gave us her copies, but it's Remembering Isaac, The Wise and Joyful Potter of Niederba by Ben Benjamin. My boyfriend's actually met him. I think he used to be in his ward. But these follow, well, okay, number one, my mom loves ceramics. I love ceramics too, but when I read these, I had never done it before. And it follows a potter who wants to travel the world, but he gets this offer to go work in this small town because their potter has died. And they're like, please come work with us. If you don't like living here, we will give you a plane ticket to anywhere you want to be in the world. Just please come live here for like a month and see if you enjoy it. So the first book follows him living there, learning about learning about the town, learning about all the residents, learning about the previous potter, which his name was Isaac, and learning about why everyone in the town loves living in the town and loved specifically Isaac. So these books, actually, I think about them so often. I need to reread them, but they were self-published. So sometimes they were self-published because he wanted to add in, number one, there's a flip book on the side, and then he just has like little doodles all over the book. It's kind of, as you can see, it's falling apart. So they're not like the best bound books, but they are really fun to read. So I want to reread these at some point, but these ones, number one, made me want to try ceramics, which I did, and I love ceramics. And two, they made me like this genre of, it's kind of a memoir for a person he's never met, in a way. They're very interesting. I would recommend these ones a lot, actually. There's only 3 books in the series. He has other series. I haven't picked them up just because I didn't love his writing that much. I just specifically love this series. Wonder by R.J. Palacio. I was in a book club when I was younger, and we read Wonder, and we couldn't find the physical copy because I think it had just come out. 2012. Yeah, that tracks, because I would have been 8, and that was around how old I was in that book club. So I was in this book club, and we found the audiobook, and so my whole family and I just listened to it in the car. We listened to it at the house. We listened to it over and over and over again, that I think we scratched the disc, and it was forever scratched because it was a library disc. I actually don't really even like reading the paper copy because the voices in the audiobook are so nostalgic to me, and they just bring me back to that feeling. Yeah, because I wasn't in 5th grade yet, and I thought that a 5th grader was so old. And I remember being so proud of Augie and everyone in his life. Oh, I'm gonna cry. This book is a heartwarming story about a boy who had, I can't remember what it's called, but it made his face all messed up when he was born, and he had like speaking problems. He had to go to like speech therapy and all this stuff. And so it's him going to public school for the first time and making friends, and how like everyone in the world's kind of against him, and then how it's such a good story. But my favorite part is that you get to see it from so many different people's perspectives. So at first it's from him, it's from Augie, and then you go to Via, which is his sister, and then you go to his friend, and then you get to see it from like his sister's boyfriend's perspective, and you get to see it from all these different people in his life. And it's just so beautiful to see how this little boy helps so many people in his life. We can't cry. I have contacts in. Kind of along those lines, this is another childhood book, The Tale of Despero by Kate Dicamillo. I love this book. This one is part of my subconscious at this point. I think about this constantly. I love this idea of this little mouse who falls in love with a princess, and then he saves her from an evil rat. Wonderful. I love this book. If you haven't read it, I'm not going to spoil anything else for you. It is so good. It is fairy tale-esque, but I don't think it really follows any fairy tales that I remember. It's so good. I love this book so much. Matilda by Ronald Dahl. This book made me love reading even more, because I read it when I was younger, and I was like, yeah, I too would sneak to the library and read books behind my parents' back if I was in this situation. And I totally empathize with Matilda. If you haven't read this is about a girl whose parents basically dislike her completely, and she loves to read, but her parents think that's a waste of time. She meets this girl named Miss Honey. She meets a teacher named Miss Honey, and she helps Miss Honey reclaim her childhood inheritance through her magical powers of her mind. Now I've got Cloudy with a Chance of Boys by Megan McDonald. This is a book that I found at the library when I was younger. I would peruse the shelves, I'd pick up anything that looked interesting, and I would read it. Sometimes I read some really weird stuff, but this was a good book. There's 3 books in the series. It's about 3 sisters named Alex, Joey, and Stevie, and it follows them as they, I think in this book, I don't remember what the plot is. Oh, so this one follows the oldest sister who has a crush on a boy, and it's really cute. You get to see their interactions with their sisters, and this one I thought about years later, and I was like, oh, I remember this book. I should give it to my sister because I really loved it, and I don't think she ever got the chance to read it. And I don't think it's quite as integral into her brain as it is mine, but I just remember the family dynamics of this book in the way that I'm like, oh, I really wish that was my family dynamics, even though I have a great family. All right, we've got Lucky in Love by Casey West. This kind of goes for any of her books. This is just one of the only physical books of hers I have. I found her books when I was in high school, when I really, really needed some clean romances because I'd fallen into some weird rabbit holes and I needed something better. Her books are fantastic. I love all of her books. Basically anything she's ever written, I recommend. They're so good. Everything that I've read by her and I've rated lower and then I've reread, I've loved even more than I loved the first time. But her books put me in that mind of high school, and I was always in high school. I never wanted to actually be in a relationship in high school, but I always wished, I always had that feeling in my brain that I was like, oh, I wish I had a relationship in high school. So reading these made me feel like I had a relationship in high school. This book has gotten me through so much trials, sadness, depression, heartache. I love Anne of Green Gables. I love the whole series. If you know me at all, I have read every single one of these books so many different times in my life. I've done a reread this year, and it is one of my favorite things I've read this year, and I've reread so many books. They're so good. I could cry thinking about them. If you haven't read Anne of Green Gables, it follows a little orphan girl who, through a mishap, gets adopted into a family, and basically the first book follows her misadventures because she's kind of not a troublemaker, but she just falls into scrapes. And it follows her and how she learns to find her place in the world, and how like her adopted parents, well, then back in those days they didn't call them parents, but the people who adopted her fall in love with her, and just the family that she gets to build and her friends, and it's so good. But you have to keep reading the series. You have to keep reading the series because you get to follow her through her life and how she grows up and her kids. And the last book tears out my heart and soul, but I love it so much. Ella Montgomery. I love her writing. It makes me feel like I am living in the world. It makes me feel like I'm in Avonlea. I've read these books when I've been sad and they made me feel better. I've read these books when I was happy and they made me feel even happier. I would die. If someone decided they wanted to erase Anne of Green Gables from the world, I would willingly give up my heart. I would sacrifice myself for these books to remain in the world. They're so good. This is a book I've talked about before because I love it so much. A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Now, I think I talk about this in a video some other time in Booksgiving, so I'll just give a literally very brief synopsis. But it follows a girl who goes to a boarding school and then her dad dies, so then she becomes kind of an indentured servant in the place where she lives, and it follows her just trying to stay as good of a person as she possibly can, and it follows her as she gets basically saved from this terrible place. I love this book so much. I read this when I was younger, and this has basically become the way that I want to live my life, the way that she thinks about life, how good she is. This is the first book I read where I realized I wanted to write things. This is Gail Carson Levine. I love her books. Every single one of her books I've read. Well, I have read every single one of her books, but some of her later books I haven't enjoyed quite as much as her older ones. But Writing Magic specifically, I think I've only read it the first time, but it kind of talks about her writing process and it gives writing prompts. And this one made me feel like, oh, I wish I could create things. You know, I shoved that down deep inside my soul and forgot about it and kind of forced myself to think that I didn't want to be a writer, but I do. And I fully embrace that now. And then along the same vein, Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. I adore this book. I adore this book. It is beautiful. If you haven't read it, please read it. If you've watched the movie, please still read this. It is so beautiful, so good. It's also very short because it is a middle grade book, but it follows Ella, who got cursed at a very young age by a fairy, a very stupid fairy, to be obedient, and that forces her to do anything that anyone wants her to do, and she cannot say no. And it's following her basically trying to break her curse. Oh my goodness, I have so many books left. I'm gonna have so much footage to edit. Okay, let's do all of Sarah M. Eden books I grabbed. So I don't know why I grabbed the second one, but Longing for Home is the first one, and this is the second one. I love these books. These are I think it's one of the first series by her that I read the first 2 books and I cried. Like, I legitimately cried reading these books. They are a beautiful story of forgiveness of yourself and love and restitution between people. It's so good. Okay, so the story is Kate goes to a town because she got hired to be is it a governess or a housekeeper? She gets hired to be a housekeeper. And when she gets there, she realizes, oh, I didn't know I had to take care of 2 kids. And the guy who hired her realizes, oh, I didn't mean to hire an Irish woman, because there is a feud. There's 2 roads in the town, and in the middle is the guy who hires her house, and he owns everyone else's houses in the town. And so he's trying to stay on the good side of it, because there's the English people who hate the Irish and the Irish who hate the English. And so he's trying to keep everyone happy. And by hiring an Irish woman, he accidentally started a terrible thing in the town. And then of course it's a romance, but both of these books are beautiful. If you never read anything else by her, I would recommend this series. It's very short. There's only 2. You can read the rest of them if you want to, but these 2 they have a very good summation of everything that happens in that series. Well, I just grabbed 3 of them because there's like 12 or 14 books in this series now. But the first one is Seeking Persephone. Love this book so much. This one makes me cry with how happy it makes me, and it's also being turned into a movie, and I literally cannot wait to see it. I'm so excited. I wish they have like a WeFunder where you can basically invest in the movie, and I wish I could. I just do not have the money to do so. But if I had enough money, I would invest thousands of dollars to make this movie a reality, because just the film stills, so good. So excited. And then the ending of the series is Heart of a Vicar and then Charming Artemis. I brought these 2 together because they're kind of one and the same in my brain in how they kind of summarize the rest of the series and they fill up all of the loose ends. This one is about the second to youngest boy, and this is about the youngest boy and then the youngest daughter in the other family. And guys, please read these books. These 2 made me bawl my eyes out. I have makeup on. I can't start crying. So the main premise of this series is you have the 2 different families. You have the Jonquil family and you have the Lancaster family, and you follow them as all their siblings get married and fall in love, and at the very end, the 2 youngest of both the series fall in love. There's plots of found family, and you follow the different family members. They kind of still have problems that go throughout all of the rest of the books, and you get to see the other family members, and you get to see it's so good. I love these so much. They're also clean. All these books I'm recommending are clean, and they don't have swearing or bad stuff in them. Please, if you need something to read this holiday season, please read a couple Sarah M. Eden books. I'm begging you. I love them so much, and I want more people to fall in love with my favorite people in the whole world, because these are my friends now. You can't tell me otherwise. All right, now we've got the book that made me fall back in love with reading. Number 1, I checked it out from the library because this cover is the most gorgeous thing I've ever seen in my entire life, along with the spine and the back. So beautiful. And then I read it, and it is just a cutesy rom-com in a fantasy world, and they're trying to reclaim this stuff, and there's a bad guy, but I didn't care about any of that because the romance and the way it was written made me cry. Literally made me cry. And I know it is just a cheesy book, and it probably does not have no one else would rate it as high as I have. Probably it probably only has like a 3-star on Goodreads, but this one brought me out of my book slump, and for that I will always hold it in high regard. So thank you, Kiera Cass, for creating this book, even though I don't really love the rest of the stuff you've written. I love this book. Now we come to the books that got me through high school. I'm not even kidding about that. I reread these so many times. I bet I can find something underlined somewhere in one of these books. I don't think you can even see it. Like, there's something underlined there. I've read Being 16 so many times. If you were turning 16, if you're 17, if you're 18 or 19, please read this book. This is a very beautiful book, very beautifully written about eating disorders and how they can affect your mental health and your life and your family and how you feel about yourself. And it also is just a beautiful story about faith and hope. And there's also a love story, which, you know, you always love. And then this series, Yearbook, First Day, and then Reunion, are some of my favorite books in the whole entire world. They follow, the first book has, I think it's 8 kids, or maybe 4. I don't remember how many you follow, but you follow them in their lives and their love stories. And then this book follows them like kind of to the end of high school. And then this book is some of them in college. I think there's a couple new characters, but this is most of them in college, and like some of them are still in high school. And then this is their younger siblings, but you still get to see those kids that you loved in the first couple books grow up and have families and get married. And these are so beautifully written. I can't even explain my love for these. Please, if you want a cute high school book, but it's also important because they touched me when I was older too. No one has ever read these on my recommendation. Please, anyone, if anyone reads these on my recommendation, please tell me if you've liked them and enjoyed them, because they make me cry every time I read them, because these are also my friends, and I wish she wrote more. Please, I know she's kind of shifted to something else, but if you have any love for these characters still in your heart, please write another book. I would read 10 of these set in the same universe. If you wanted to write more in Being 16 universe, I'd read it. If you wanted to write more in this universe, I would read it. Please, I love them so much. The book that I read in quarantine, sitting outside on the back porch. I can't remember if this was quarantine or if this was the year before quarantine, because I watched the movie on my teeny tiny flip phone, and I got that right before quarantine hit. So yeah, this book, Wives and Daughters, is beautiful. I love this so much, but fair warning, if you're gonna read this book, find one where you have the author's note, but it's not the author's note, it's the editor's note at the end that explains what she would have done to finish the book, because she dies before she finishes this book. Why am I crying? Probably because these are some of my favorite characters in the whole world. I've read some of her other books, but this one is the one that's touched me the deepest, and also, this is not the actual copy of this book. I want to get a different one that's more easily legible, but my mom looked up this book on Amazon, and she found someone that literally just printed out on printer paper and bound it. And I did. I have read this entire book, actually, in this format. It was really difficult, and that's why it took me all quarantine summer long. But I love this series. I re-listened to it this year, and I rewatched the movies, and I love her writing. I love Elizabeth Gaskell's writing. Oh, I didn't give you any plot summary on that. So this guy gets told that he needs a mother for his daughter because his wife has died, and his daughter basically grew up without a mother. And so he's like, so he kind of goes on the hunt for a wife, and he finds this woman, and he's like, oh yeah, I remember you when you were younger, basically proposes to her on the spot. And then he regrets it immediately because she's kind of a flibberty gibbet, and there's not a lot of marital satisfaction, you know. But she comes with a daughter from a previous marriage named Cynthia, and Cynthia is basically the driving factor of this whole entire book. But it follows basically the chaos that Cynthia puts on Molly's life, because Molly is the main character. Love Molly. She is an angel and a saint, and I also love Cynthia, even though she is a force of chaos. But it's a beautiful book. I think it's set time period wise a little bit before Jane Austen, which, speaking of Jane Austen, I read these in my bunk bed on the bottom shelf. I read the annotated version. You have the actual story on one side, and you have the annotations on the other, and I would read it basically just like this, and then I'd turn the page, and then if I actually wanted to see something, I'd read this page. I love these books. Jane Austen, she's a classic for a reason. She writes the most beautiful books, and the most beautiful stories. I think in this copy, because every once in a while I'll be like, oh, I really want to read a Jane Austen book, and so I'll start reading it from wherever my bookmark was in the book. And I think my bookmark right now is in the middle of Persuasion, but I am almost all the way through reading this entire book because I've read all the other ones before it. But I think the only one by her I have never read is Lady Susan. So I'm excited to read that. But other than that, I've read every single one of her writings, and I want to get really pretty copies to put on my shelf because this is kind of an unwieldy copy to read if you just want to read one of the books and not hold all of them in your hands. But I love Jane Austen. She's beautiful. I've also watched so many different adaptations of her work, and I have read a spin-off series. And by a spin-off series, I mean this is the only one I probably will ever read. This is Pride and Prejudice from Mr. Darcy's viewpoint. Now, these were one of the books that I read when I was younger, and I remember thinking, oh, these are so cute. I love these. They're so good. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, they're kind of silly, but they also, I guess it's kind of like my fan fiction of what Mr. Darcy was thinking during Pride and Prejudice. But I think these ones started me in my love of reading romances from that time period, along with Jane Austen. But these ones I was like, oh, there's so much potential. I could read so much more. And that's what got me into Miss Sarah M. Eden, because I've read so many of her books at this point. But this is actually a pretty decent series. I would recommend this if you wanted to read Jane Austen fanfiction. Gone with the Wind by Margaret Gaskell. This book, I wanted to read it for some reason, and I asked my boyfriend, who was then at the time just my coworker and friend, that I wanted this for Christmas. Totally forgot that I told him I wanted it for Christmas, but he remembered and he got it for me for Christmas. And then when we started like kind of liking each other and dating each other, I started reading it, which was I think like 6 months later. And I remember reading this, and then I would text him and update him what was happening in this book, because my goodness, this book has tea. And I remember texting him like, when I'm done with this book, I'm gonna throw it at the wall. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, I'm so mad at her. She's so annoying. And then I got to the last couple pages and I finished the book, and I just went, because I couldn't throw it at the wall. I hate this book, but it is brilliantly written, and the ending is perfect. It is perfect, and I stand by that. But now I'm dating him, and I love him very much. But this copy will always make me happy to look at because he bought it for me, and I read it while talking to him, basically. All right, second to last, we've got Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that I love a good classic, and boy, is this a good classic. This follows Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy as they grow up, 4 sisters, and it follows them in their love lives. It follows them as tragic things happen in their lives. It's basically just a slice of life. There is a plot, but it's kind of just more of a character study in a way, and them as they do things and shenanigans happen and that sort of a thing. There are, I think, 3 more books that follow them in their lives, and I want to get a copy of them at some point, like each of them, and read them in a row, because I don't think I've ever read them back to back to back, but I love this book so much. It always reminds me of Christmas time, and I love Little Women. It's so good. And last, but certainly not least, we have the scriptures. So, as some of you may know, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so I read the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants along with the Old Testament and the New Testament. These are my copies that I read in school, and I took them to seminary with me. And these ones are basically the ones that I read in high school. And so I have so many of my high school markings and annotations and bookmarks just all over these copies. And I have since turned to reading them on my phone because it's a little bit easier, but I do want to get myself a good copy to read and underline because I really do enjoy it. But these ones, specifically the Doctrine and Covenants, those years of my lives really helped me get through those really hard times because of the truths and the goodness that are in these books. I really do know that what happens in these books are true, and that they are words from the Lord's own mouthpieces. I could talk about so many other books. But I think this is pretty good to talk about all the books that I'm grateful for. But I'm so grateful that all these books exist because they've formed me, who I am at my core, and I need to now put these all back on my bookshelf because this is basically a huge dent of everything that is in there. And I'm also so very grateful to all of you guys, which I have 24 subscribers today as I'm filming this. I don't know if it's going to get any bigger before this pre-scheduled video is going to come out, but I'm just so very grateful forever for all of you guys who watch these videos and who just are genuinely enjoying seeing me talk about things, which is crazy because I never thought that would happen in my life. But thank you so much for watching, I guess. I hope that you have either found a book that you want to read or you've read some of these and you understand why they're part of my life. But I will see you tomorrow for yet another booksgiving, for yet another booksgiving video. And I hope you're enjoying my little thing. I don't know if it makes a lot of sense, but I thought booksgiving was a cute idea. So we'll see if I do it next year. I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving and say things that you're grateful for in the comments if you wish to, or whether you like turkey or not. Anyway, see you tomorrow. Goodbye.